Hello. This screencast is quite different from my previous screencast. This is specifically for people who are using the Windows operating system. This could be considered as a prequel of many of my screencasts because it covers the very basics of installing Python and it goes a step beyond. So what does this screencast cover? To go to the contents, I'll be talking about how you can install Python on Windows and how you can install Python 3 as well. The instructions are pretty much the same, but I would be mostly covering Python 3. How can you install pip from within the PowerShell? So most of my screencasts use pip, and it's quite a standard within Python developers to use pip. But I found that users of Windows operating system find it very difficult to figure out how to install pip for a number of reasons, because the instructions are not really clear on many websites, and primarily also because of the fact that Python 3 introduces some means of integrating pip and virtual environment. Moving on, we'd be also talking about how you can use pip, the simple one-liners that say how to install using pip install, and also we'll talk about how you can set up a virtual environment. That is considered to be another standard thing which every Python developer does, and also we'll probably try to install something via pip. So the question of motivation, why did I make the screencast? I covered most of these points in my earlier slide. I found that there's a lot of information that is wrong, that's no longer updated, and some of these instructions did not work for me when I tried to install pip or set up a pip kind of environment similar to what I have in my usual day-to-day operating system, which is Linux. So I felt that a comprehensive or a simple enough guide is lacking when it comes to how to set up something for Python developers. So I created the screencast. Before we start, let me try to tell you, most of people who even use Windows do not actually develop on Windows for a number of reasons. If you are a web developer, most of the time your website would be hosted on a Unix server. So it makes a lot of sense for you to develop in the same environment that you're deploying or expecting a production version to run. So most of the people use Windows machines with a virtual machine running on top of it, which actually uses Linux inside that virtual machine. I'll explain that in a bit. The other problem with Windows is that the latest version of the operating system, especially Windows 7 and Windows 8, have a lot of checks and permissions and access problems, which actually prevent you, if you're expecting the most of the time, the tool makers or the library creators would have expected something to work in the Unix way, and they would the users would actually hit a roadblock when the build does not complete or an installation does not proceed because of the access problems, which is pretty annoying if you ask me. The next problem is usually the binary packages, sometimes which are required when you install something, are tricky to build. The standard approach in Windows to build something, especially if it is distributed as a binary package, is expecting a Visual C++ environment, which most Windows developers, at least the beginners, might not have set up. Even though the Visual C++ environment is free for download. And lastly, many of the tooling support, the prior story of version control in Windows was not a great story, but now it's improving with tools like Git for Windows and a lot of Windows ports of the popular version control. Things like curses, which actually comes from its Unix roots, do not have a good equivalent in Windows, which makes running several tools like bpython or any of those terminal emulators, anything that expects you to display something on the console with pretty colors, pretty looking formatting and lines and boxes. Those things use curses, and usually curses is not found reliably on Windows. What do I suggest if I'm saying that you should not use Windows is actually not to ditch Windows. You can install a virtual machine emulator like Virtual Environment, which is distributed for free by Oracle. Just go to their website, just install Virtual Environment and download any of the Linux images. I personally prefer to use the Ubuntu image, which is basically a bare bones kind of an Ubuntu without KDE or GTK. Which is a pretty decent desktop environment, but not very heavy on your system. It's one of the most lightweight Ubuntu environments that you can find, which is perfect for a virtual machine. Or you can use the other alternative, which is an all-in-one Python distribution. There is a very well-known batteries included kind of a distribution called Active States Active Python. Just search on Google for Active Python and you will find their website. You just have to download it. It's a one single installer which installs a lot of things, including an IDE. I think it's Komodo IDE, and you're good enough to go. It has everything included in it, like pip, all those things that you would have expected the Python language to come by itself. And there is a very recent project called Python XY, which is very popular among the scientific computing community. So if you're interested in scientific computing and you're using a lot of libraries like Pandas or NumPy, all the scientific tools come built into Python XY, whereas the Active Python is more of a generalist, beginner friendly kind of a distribution. Both of these are for Windows and other operating systems. Okay, so you seem to be very persistent and stubborn in using Windows for your development environment for a number of reasons. For example, you're going to develop a desktop app which you're going to distribute among your desktop users who are using Windows, and you expect them to use Python without installing Python, or for any reason that you feel that you cannot install Python on any other operating system except for Windows. So first, for all you people, hang on, I'm going to explain to you the easiest way, or the methods which I find reliable to set up Python on Windows. The first step is fairly simple. Just go to this URL, which is the standard Python website, the download link. Once you go to that page, you will find a couple of options, and here you have to read a little carefully. It's very easy to click the first link, which is highlighted here, and think that okay, it says Windows x86 Python 3, which is good, and I am going ahead. But one very important distinction that's not, according to my opinion, very clear on the website is that there are two versions of Python, which are two families, I would say, of Python which are currently running, which is the Python 2 series and the Python 3 series. The Python 2 series is the legacy Python, which you would find on a majority of systems today. But Python 3 series is a rewrite or a modern version of Python, which is expected to be the future of Python. So depending on which one you need, you would have to go for one of these series. So if you look at the first top set of links, there are all the Python 3 series, the latest version of the Python 3 series, and the next set of links are basically the latest version of the Python 2 series for different operating systems in different forms. Now you have to make a choice here between this selecting from this group or selecting from the 2 series. So if you ask me, and if you're a beginner, what I would recommend is, if you're following a book or if you're following a blog post or a screencast, just choose whichever the person on or the author has chosen for that particular tutorial series. If they are using Python 3 series, I would strongly recommend you to go for the Python 3 series, so that there are not many differences that you have to remember, and you can follow the series exactly. Or if you're following a book that says Python 2.4 or Python 2.6, then since most of the new changes in Python 2 series are backward compatible to any of the previous versions, you can safely go with the 2 series. You still have to make a choice between once you have made the choice of the 3 series. For example, you have made the choice of assume that you have made the choice that you're going to use the 3 series. You still have to 2 Windows options here, which is x86 MSI installer or the x86 64 MSI installer. The first option is for all the 32-bit Windows installations, and the second option is for all the 64-bit Windows installations. Now the big question is, how do you know which one you have to use? It's quite simple actually. You have to press your Windows key and the pause key, and if you're on a laptop, you probably have to press the function key as well and the pause key, which brings up the basic system information window. Now, if you don't know which type of operating system you have installed, 32-bit or 64-bit, just look at this underlined bit, which says system type is 32-bit operating system. And you just have to go back to your download page and select the first option, which is the x86 option. The 64-bit option is the second one, which says x86 64. And if you have a 64-bit operating system, which is shown in that system settings window, I would recommend you to download the second one. So once you have made that download, just click on that downloaded MSI installer, and it'll ask you this question: do you want to run this or do you want to cancel? So you just go ahead and say run, and the installer starts. So once you start the installer, it asks you whether you want to install for all users or for me, just for you. According to me, it's good enough if you select either of these options, but for the sake of an example, let's say we select install for all users. And then unlike other installers, it does not go to program files and install it within program files. This is probably to avoid some file naming issues, like there's a space in between program and files. So it's safe enough to go by what the default installer suggests as the default. If it is a Python 2 series installation, it probably say Python 2.7 C:/Python 2.7. Because I selected the 3 series, it says Python 3.3. So I'm saying next for that. And this is one important step that you have to remember. When it says customize Python 3, you have to select, you would notice that the tree, it shows you all the components in a tree fashion, and it will show that the last component is not selected. The last component is actually adding python.exe to your path. Now, according to me, this selection is not enabled by default, because if you are using different versions of Python, it might be confusing if you install all of them on your path. But this is not really beginner friendly. So if you are a beginner and if you don't know, if you haven't used Python before, I strongly recommend you to select this option. Just click on this drop down, say entire feature will be installed on the local hard drive, and then this would not be a cross mark anymore, and you can have Python installed on your path. This helps you, for example, if you open your PowerShell window or your command prompt window and simply type Python, because it's on your path, you can start working on Python. If you don't select this option, you won't be able to do that. So let's go ahead and select that, and that's it. So when you finish, you would actually have a working installation of Python. And when you open your command prompt, because it's already added to your path, even without restarting, you should be able to start working on Python. So now, how do you start Python? You just click on your Windows key. You have the start menu, just type PowerShell, and you can have PowerShell started. For the rest of the tutorial, for the rest of the screencast, I would recommend you to use the admin part of the PowerShell, because that's generally, if you face any errors or access issues, being an admin usually helps. So just don't, if you want to be the admin, just don't click on this icon. just right click on it and say run as admin, and you can run the PowerShell as the admin. Once you enter the PowerShell window, just type Python and you should be able to see the Python prompt. And just type some example. Let me try to show you that using a PowerShell window. So this is a PowerShell window which I've just opened, and I just type Python, and the Python prompt appears, and I can type any valid Python code here. Usually it's interactive, so whatever is typed in a single line is appearing as a result. Now if I want to exit, I can either type exit and just exit it, and that's it. So that means Python has been successfully installed. So installing Python is actually the easiest part of the step. The real meat of this screencast is actually installing pip. You need to run a couple of commands. Now sometimes PowerShell actually does not allow you to run some of these commands, so that's why I recommended you to run PowerShell, right click and run it as an admin, and sometimes you need to set the execution policy as unrestricted. So this is because most of the remote shell, most of the things which you download from the internet are not usually, so I just say yes. This it says it's denied because I was not the admin, but if you right click and run as admin, it should allow you. So this I recommend because some of the things which we are going to run are actually downloaded from the internet. Those scripts need to be run, and this execution policy probably stops you from doing that. So it's suggested that you use this line. Next, you have a bunch of commands to run. So let me take you through it step by step. First, I would like a place to save all the downloaded files. So I'm going to call it envs environments. So let me paste that first line. So it has created that environments directory, and going to that directory is also simple. I just paste the second line and I go to that directory. So right now it should be empty. If I type ls, there should be nothing inside it. Now you have a one-liner, which is basically a PowerShell command, a series of commands which actually tell you to download a particular script from this particular URL and save it in the envs directory so that you can run it later. So I'm going to do that, and if you type ls now, you can see that that single file has been downloaded. It's about 17 kilobytes and it's successfully downloaded. Now I need to download one more script, which the first one actually is helping you to install easy install, and the second one is actually helping you to install pip. So I download that as well, the second one, and now I should have these two files in my envs directory. Now I need to copy this line which says execute. This should be envs, and once I do that, it actually downloads the distribute and then actually installs distribute into my Python environment. So what is happening right now is it's installing a command called easy install. So which should take a minute. So easy install is a command which has been installed now. As you can see, easy install is a script. Now some of the instructions for installing pip says all you have to do is easy install pip. For some reason that does not work for me in Python 3. So I have changed that step and tried to use get pip. So now I'll show you how to use get pip. So just like before, this particular script actually installs pip, and since it's already installed, it's showing that it's all completed. Now all I have to do is show how pip runs. And as you can see, you have the great pip command at your disposal. One final thing which we have to do now is to create a virtual environment. And some of us actually wonder, why do you need to create a virtual environment? This is because, for example, you're a Python developer who needs to do web development as well as scientific computing. Now, if you install everything on your system, which generally Windows developers do, because you get these libraries in the .exe format as well, and if you download the .exe library and install it, it's going to install it in your system path, and later you might want to try a different version of it. You will probably overwrite that previous version, and now you have a piece of code that was dependent on the previous version, but because you installed a .exe, it updated the entire system-wide settings. So what Python developers generally do is that you create your own virtual environment, which is like a simple embedded system which is complete in itself, a complete environment which is insulated from the system environment. It's actually very intuitive once you start using it, so I'll probably start installing it right away. So in Python 3, I should remind you that there is something called making your own virtual environment as a part of the standard library. For some reason, it did not work very well for me in Windows 7. So I'm going to use the standalone virtual environment package, which is also quite easy to use. So when I say, so these are the commands that you have to use. I'm going to go to another virtual environment. Sorry, I'm going back to the previous one. That was the wrong instruction. And now I have to say pip install virtual env. So this is a third-party package which should be installed already on my system, and it's also available in Python 3 as well as Python 2. Now I'm going to create a simple virtual environment called Acme, and it'll throw a couple of lines which shows what it's doing. You'll get a new Python executable. You have set up tools. It'll show you the progress, and finally it'll install pip within that environment so that you can start using pip. At the end of the process, you should see a different command prompt when you activate the environment. So how do you activate the environment? You have to go to that particular environment. So you should say Acme, and you should press tab. It'll actually complete it for you, and again you press a backslash. Remember, backslashes are used in Windows, and Linux uses the forward slashes, and go to scripts folder. Irrespective of which virtual environment name you gave, it will have a scripts folder. It'll have an activate command. Now activate command has two options. It has .psi and ps1 and batch file and all that, but since we are already using Windows PowerShell, I would recommend you to use the .ps1 script. Now if the script ran correctly, your command prompt should have changed. Now it should say Acme. It should say Acme and the PowerShell command as before. So now it has run successfully. If you run pip freeze, which shows you all the installed pip packages, you should probably not get anything, which means that it's a completely blank, empty virtual environment. Now you can start installing anything you like. You can say pip install Django, and it'll install Django for you. Or you can say pip install IPython, and it'll install IPython for you. So pip by itself works quite beautifully, and if you want to get out of this environment, you can use the deactivate script, which is Acme scripts deactivate.psi, just as the way you activated it. For some reason or you could close the shell, that works as well. Anyways, so that was how you can install Python, pip and virtual environment in Windows. I hope you liked this tutorial and you found it useful for creating your own scripts. So in case you have any questions, I suggest you to post it. You can use the YouTube comments, which is not very, I would say, has become a little bit unusable after the Google Plus update. If you're not able to get any answers from me, you can of course start raise a question within Stack Overflow, and you can get answers quite quickly in that as well. So hope you found this screencast useful. This is Arun Ravindran from arunrocks.com. Thank you.